He needs to call it off.
And what will make him do that?
It's going to be only reversals on the battlefield, plus the behind the scenes leverage exerted by China and India. They could exert that. Right now, they haven't quite done it. This is one of my concerns with the West is got all these fence sitters out there in East Africa and South Asia. They're fence sitting because they're not sure that we really mean it in the West when we say rules-based international order, democracy, human rights, respect your neighbors, don't solve problems by force, go to the international legal system. They're not sure we mean it. If you can't defend it by force, the United Nations has always had the problem, like the League of Nations before it, that it doesn't have the power to defend this system. But we will lose the United Nations, just like we lost the League of Nations, if we don't defend this system. So right now, in the Middle East, in South Asia, people are still on the fence. They're saying, does President Biden really mean it? It's looking like he does. Yeah, he just got another weapon shipment of almost $1 billion going into Ukraine. Looks like he might mean it. But mighty Russia, you mean they can't conquer Ukraine? Maybe Russia's not as strong as we thought.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't have to be as afraid of Russia. Maybe we can speak up for our own values. And so this tide has to shift. It takes courageous leadership in Western capitals, including in the United States, to do this. The United States is the leader. You cannot lead NATO from behind. When I was a NATO commander, what I'll never forget, I was in a North Atlantic Council meeting, and the Greek ambassador came up to me and he said, General Clark, he said, these factories of truck factories you're bombing in Serbia, they're owned by Greeks. I said, yeah, but they're producing trucks for Serbs. He said, I know. He said, I'll tell Athens this.
It's interesting.
So, I mean, they're looking for American leadership and strong leadership. And we're doing it step by step. And some in Europe have said, we should have been stronger. Yeah, you can make that charge. I would have liked to have seen the MiG deal go through and give Ukrainian more. I would like to have seen more airplanes. But they are now getting much more equipment coming in. We're tipping on the balance point. The question is, can we get enough in the next 4 or 5 weeks that Ukraine can establish the military conditions in which Russia and Putin decide, this is ridiculous. Pull this thing back, call it off. Let's do something different. Let's say we're having a winter festival in Russia and we need our troops back or something. Make something up, get out of there. And
do you think that
of course, Putin could do anything he wants.
Do you think that the Western nations will say, or Zelensky himself will say, that going back to the borders of February of this year is a sufficient win, although it's not a win? Or do you think
all this? No way. Now, maybe Germany and France would say that. They're not there. Sometimes I hear Europeans say, it's like, as long as there are 1 or 2 nations between us and then in Russia, we're safe because somebody will do something before they can get to us. Maybe that's not the case. I think more and more Europe is seeing the fact that security, safety, stability is indivisible in Europe. This has been the dream really since the fall of the Berlin Wall. France gave it to us. They said a Europe whole and free, Atlantic to the Urals. And we actually hoped that Russia would be part of this. We didn't go beyond the Urals because we didn't want to interfere with Asia and China. It was like a Europe. Urals is where traditionally Europe stops. That was the dream. And that's why NATO took action in Yugoslavia in the 1990s, because they realized security in Europe is indivisible. Now, right now, NATO has said, okay, we're not getting involved. Okay, that's okay. It was a ploy. It was a way of denying Putin the ability to say he was going to go against war against NATO. Okay, I got that. But all of these NATO nations are involved, and the nations in Eastern Europe Romania, one of them, but and especially in the Baltics, they're petrified that what would happen if Putin succeeded in Ukraine. They know what would happen. You look at Finland and Sweden, they joined NATO for a reason.
Yeah.
I was NATO commander. I'd go to these countries and they'd say, yeah, we'd really like to be in NATO. We work really close with you, but our people, they don't see any reason for it. Okay. Yeah. They see a reason for it now. It's popular in these countries. That's why they did it, because they see that security in Europe is fundamentally indivisible in this age. Putin needs to pull back. He needs to recognize he hit the immovable force. It's the same thing that happened to Milosevic in a way. When we were first going into the fight in Serbia, Milosevic was saying things like it owns Kosovo. Kosovo is part of Serbia. These people in NATO, they don't even know where Kosovo is on a map. They don't care about it. He was right. But what he didn't understand that when NATO got engaged, NATO couldn't lose, or you'd lose NATO. So therefore, Milosevic hit the immovable force in NATO. Now, NATO's not directly engaged in this, but Putin has hit the immovable force. He's got all the wealth and population of Eastern, Central, and Western Europe recognizing increasingly that he's not going to get away with it. He needs to recognize reality and pull back. All the lip worship of nations in East Africa, India buying his oil, fence sitting in the Gulf, that's over. That's not going to save Putin.